Well, you know, I talked about in the opening 5, I want to talk about how we got here, and I want to just put some pieces together. How we got here, that we could actually have this level of racial tension in this country, this level of unrest, this level of determination to spread, to eviscerate freedom, to eviscerate the capitalist system, eviscerate free markets, push socialism and communism as norms, as things that are reasonably on the playing field in America, that are legitimate topics of conversation in America. We're actually having conversations like this in America, whether or not we want to become socialist / communist, whether we're okay with the cultural Marxism taking over this country. I want to lay some groundwork for how we got here. One I've talked about quite a bit, and that groundwork just is that the Communist Party in China, originally the Communist Party, the very beginning communists that came out of Marx and Engels, the Communist Party came to America at least in the 1920s, and they set out to say, how are we going to take over America and get rid of this, evil, what they thought of as evil capitalists and people who live in freedom and have free markets and have capitalism. How are we going to destroy it? They set out to destroy it in a series of ways. And they had not just it was not a notion they could have a military invasion and crush America tomorrow and everybody wakes up and we're communists. It was a slow eating away at the fabric of America, eating away at our belief in the ideas of America. So you had communists infiltrating colleges. You had academia infiltrated by the Marxist communist movement in this country that put radical leftists into positions of power throughout our country, especially in the academic institutions, and they work slowly. This radical leftism, very slow, very patient, very willing to make small steps of progress and keep on moving. So now we are here in 2020, we have a generation of students who've grown up in our public schools, K through 12 and college, kids who've grown up with this undermining of America as a norm in education, undermining the ideas of America, the founding of America, undermining the ideas of the beauty of the rights of individual freedom, the right of people to live in freedom as a God-given right. This was a notion commonly understood at our founding and for 100 more years after, and slowly the left has worked away, chipped away at it. So you have loss of faith in the notion of the fairness of the free market system, even though capitalism has brought the most abundance to the most people in this world. The poorest in America, in our free system, live better than most of the rest of the world, and yet you have the left trying to destroy the freedom of America and bring communism or socialism or Marxism. It doesn't matter. You get hung up in those isms, and the left tries to parse and nuance and say, well, it's not really communism, it's just Marxism. Forget about it. It's government-controlled society. That's what it is. So you had that aspect of it. Next, I want to talk about what happened during the 8 years of the Obama administration. President Obama is a very radical leftist. He ran in the only party he could run in, the Democrat Party. He's a very radical leftist. Among the things that he allowed and permitted and even agitated was growing racial tension in this country. Growing racial tension, even though he was the first black president elected in our country, elected by millions of Americans, including millions of white Americans voting for him. The 8 years under Obama saw the growing racial tension, not an alleviation of racial tension, but a growing racial tension. And it was for the purpose of continuing, of disrupting America's sense of love of country, love of the founding ideas of America, love of the idea spelled out in the Declaration, all men created equal, rights from God simply because we're born. All those ideas are antithetical to the way Obama looked at the world. You may recall Obama was the one very early on when he was getting involved in politics. He spoke very harshly and negatively about the United States Constitution. He called it a charter of negative liberties. His point was that the Constitution prohibited, it forbade him, it was forbidden by the Constitution for the federal government to become the Marxist government controlling kind of government he wanted to have. He wanted the federal government, the national government, to have far more power than the Constitution permitted. He wanted to have the Marxist control of the economy rooted in the federal government, and he recognized the Constitution didn't really permit that. But I want to get to specific things that happened during his administration that tie into race relations. And if you don't know these stories, some of the things I may tell you, you may be saying, I know, I know, I know. Other things you might be saying, what in the world are you talking about? I'll start with the Trayvon Martin incident. Obviously a bad incident in American history. It was February of 2012, and Trayvon Martin was a young man who was killed in an interaction with George Zimmerman in the state of Florida. If you listen to my show in the past, you know there's a great book out called The Trayvon Martin Hoax, and it involved an exposure of the basic notion that the entire criminal prosecution of George Zimmerman included a major hoax, because the witness who testified claiming that Trayvon Martin was on the phone with her and was not the real person who was on the phone. It was a completely fabricated witness. But the real point of the Trayvon Martin story, why I'm bringing up today, is this. George Zimmerman was acquitted by the jury in Florida because all of the evidence and all of the facts fit the scenario that showed that even though George Zimmerman is the one who got out of his car and was, as a neighborhood watch person, wondering what this young man was doing, that at the end of the day, what happened between them was that Trayvon Martin, who was not a slim, tiny little child like he was portrayed in media pictures, he was a big kid. Trayvon Martin was sitting on George Zimmerman, slamming George Zimmerman's head, slamming his head into the pavement. His head is bleeding in the back. People die from this. George Zimmerman was afraid Trayvon Martin was going to kill him. Legitimately afraid, the jury found, because Trayvon Martin was smashing George Zimmerman's head into the pavement. And Zimmerman testified Trayvon Martin is trying to reach for Zimmerman's gun. Zimmerman got a hold of the gun and shot him. That's what happened. It's a horrible tragedy. Everyone on the planet wishes it never happened. But George Zimmerman was not convicted. He was found not guilty by the jury because George Zimmerman acted in self-defense. These are the facts. These are the facts that the jury heard when they acquitted George Zimmerman. These are the same facts that caused when President Obama urged the federal government, the Justice Department, to look into this. Could they find some basis for prosecuting George Zimmerman for this incident based on a violation of civil rights? And the federal government, same thing. They look into it, same conclusion. George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin in self-defense. It was a horrible incident. Everyone wishes it didn't happen. But it was not an example of racial profiling. It was not an example of the federal government or any other government entity or police entity picking on an innocent young black man. It was an unfortunate incident that involved Trayvon Martin choosing to try to kill George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman, reasonably fearing for his life, shooting. Now, you know those facts, and if you read the Trayvon Martin hoax or see the film, you'll know a lot more of those facts. My point in raising this about the Obama administration is this. The Obama administration has profound power. The unique bully pulpit. The unique bully pulpit to tell the truth to the American people, the same truth I just told to you. Think about every statement Obama ever made. President Obama never told the truth about that incident. And of course he knew. His own Justice Department looked into it. His own Justice Department reported back to him, you can't prosecute someone for killing someone in self-defense. George Zimmerman, unfortunately, shot Trayvon Martin in self-defense. Obama knew those facts, but the racial tension that evolved in this country as a result of the Trayvon Martin case worked well in the Obama effort to keep America agitated about race. Think about if your motive was, if you're a president, no matter what your skin color, if you're president and you have those facts come to light and you can say, you know what, George Zimmerman probably shouldn't have got out of his car that night. You know, he didn't need to get out of his car, but he did. And once he was out, the simple fact is Trayvon Martin attacked him, had him pinned to the ground, and was smashing his head into the pavement. And George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin in self-defense. If you were the president and you wanted race relations to heal, if you wanted the people to have those facts so that they could understand what happened, you would tell the public. But everything Obama ever said about that case, everything was designed to perpetuate the lie that the prosecutors tried to put forward and that the radical left tried to put forward about Trayvon Martin being an innocent young boy who was shot for no reason at all by a stranger in the dark and at nighttime in some neighborhood in Florida. That narrative fit the effort of the people who try very hard to keep America divided, who want racial tension. The Trayvon Martin case was one of the two cases, if you read the Black Lives Matter website, Trayvon Martin case was one. The Michael Brown case in Ferguson, Missouri was the other one. The Michael Brown case, Ferguson, Missouri, happened in 2014. In that case, Michael Brown eventually, at the end of a day of interaction with an officer, was shot and killed by a police officer. And what story got put out by the media, by the left, by the people who want to keep racial tension going in this country was that Michael Brown, when he saw that the officer had his gun out, had his gun pointed at him, that Michael Brown put his hands up and said, "Don't shoot." That is a story the left tried to tell America, that Michael Brown stopped charging the officer. He was charging the officer. He's a big guy. Michael Brown, big guy, charging the officer. And that when the officer pulled his gun, Michael Brown put his hands up and stopped charging and said, "Don't shoot." And that the officer shot him anyway. That was a story the leftist agitators used about the Michael Brown case. Again, what the evidence showed, and we've actually played this on our show and made reference to it, and you can read it yourself. The very last witness at the grand jury hearing, who is putting forth the evidence that the grand jury has to decide whether or not to issue an indictment. The very last witness testifying to the grand jury in this case in Ferguson, Missouri, was a black woman sitting in the front seat of a car, the passenger seat, front seat of a car, saw the whole thing, and she's called to testify. What did you see happen? And she told the grand jury, "I don't like the police." This is a black woman. "I don't like the police. I did not want to be called here." And Michael Brown did not stop charging the officer. He never stopped running toward the officer, charging him. He never stopped. He never put his hands up. He never said, "Don't shoot." This is the last witness the grand jury heard in their contemplation of whether to charge the officer. But the entire fabric of that story, that Michael Brown, supposedly innocent young man, put his hands up, stopped charging, said "don't shoot," that's the story, the narrative that the left has pushed. Now, other people have come out with this story. I'm not the only one. Other people, the grand jury testimony was actually made into a play. Somebody literally took the exact words of every witness at the grand jury and had it put together as a play. And so people literally in this play weren't making up any lines except for what the grand jury testimony was and played it. The guy tried to show America, this is what actually the grand jury heard. Of course they didn't indict the officer. The guy, Michael Brown, charging the officer, had earlier, just within an hour or two before that, punched the same officer, tried to grab his weapon, obviously agitated conduct toward the officer, and the officer ended up in that situation and yelling at him to stop. Officer saying stop. Michael Brown did not stop, did not put his hands up, never said "don't shoot." So those two cases, Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, were the two cases that Black Lives Matter movement points to when they say this is why we got started. It is cruel to America cruel to America that President Obama, in his time as president, because he knows all those facts I just told you. This is why the grand jury would not indict the officer. This is why, when, again, Obama had the Department of Justice look into it, can we possibly indict this officer? They look at it, same conclusion. No, because the facts don't justify an indictment. And I'm saying this because I think that America, all of America, of every race, skin color, creed, national origin, every American deserves to know the truth from the government about these kinds of incidents. When President Obama, as the first black president, claiming to want to, help lift America up, leaves those facts out of the public eye, never brings those facts forward, never tells America, actually, here's what really happened with Michael Brown. You have the obvious, the natural reaction when you believe the lies that the leftists made up about the incident. Naturally, Americans are agitated and upset and frustrated and angry, and they should be if their stories were true. I am not claiming that police conduct toward black Americans has been perfect in every incident. Of course not. We always can be better. We always have to be watching. We always have to be training officers. We have to be caring about officers, wanting them to get the best training possible. We always have to look into incidents of shooting. We also have to question and challenge and try to prevent police brutality. But those two incidents kicked off the Black Lives Matter movement. And so when I say how America got molded and manipulated by leftists to be where we are in 2020 with the level of division we have, President Obama played a key role in hiding vital facts and not having the backbone, the integrity to stand up and tell America the truth about those cases. He preferred the racial tension to remain because racial tension plays into his efforts to keep America agitated, which leads America to then be more moldable, be less believing in themselves, believing in their country, believing in their fellow citizens, believing in the idea of America. Other agitations, I called this segment, I called it Obama, Soros, New York Times, and Reparations. I want to mention Soros. I'm going to get to New York Times reparations in a minute. But I want to mention Soros for a second, George Soros. There's an article out recently talking about how George Soros, who is, I'm sure you know the name, but George Soros, a billionaire many times over, one of the wealthiest people on the planet Earth, a radical socialist. He hates America. He hates God. He hates religion. He hates Christianity. He really hates freedom and free markets. He's a radical socialist communist who hates America. And he spends money every election cycle to keep America churned up and stirred up and upset and angry. This is what he does. This is his point in everything he does politically. He is trying to keep America. He's part of the agitation to destroy the founding ideas of America. So in this election cycle, Soros supposedly is set to double his 2016 spending, pouring $40 million into a super PAC. People, $40 million is chump change. He's spending far more than $40 million to try to impact the election of 2020. This happened to be something that came to public light because he had to declare this money. But I want to make clear what he tries to do with his money. You might think, okay, $40 million, he's putting his money into Democrat candidates who are, maybe they're a little more leftist, maybe they want a little higher taxes, maybe they want to have, various changes in law. He is doing things. Soros up here, a range of 5 or 6 organizations beneath him, and then beneath that, hundreds of smaller organizations, bits and pieces, getting money funneled down from the Soros people with the intention. It's not just, the least harmful impact of his money is that the money is paid to campaigns so they can run television ads, radio ads, put up billboards. They can be part of the normal campaign process. But far more insidious and sinister and ongoing is the Soros effort to foment unrest, to foment dissension, to foment distrust among the American people in their government. He tries very hard. He's part of the effort of the leftist mission to destroy this beautiful, great, glorious country with his efforts to undermine the American people, their trust in the system, their trust in the very founding ideas of America. Very radical guy, funds Black Lives Matter, which he is fully aware is a Marxist effort. funds radical organizations of all kinds in this country, and he continues this agitation. And the money he spends continues the agitation on American campuses, in media, in Hollywood, in entertainment. The whole mission of destroying the idea of America. Soros has a big part of it. So we get to 2020, we have this time in America where we have the discussion about reparations and whether reparations should happen in America. On the reparations front, there is a movement. Before I get to the New York Times, there's a movement to try to bring reparations to America, and to be really clear what they're talking about is the Democrats in Congress, the radical left in Congress, talking about, they tried to create a study group. They just want a study group, that's all, just a study group, looking into ways in which reparations could be paid so that people living today through the tax system will pay money into the government, and the money will be distributed to people who are the descendants of slaves. And slavery ended in America in 1865. We had the civil rights movement that ended segregation. You know, we're not a perfect country, but we have ended segregation decades ago. All of that, by the way, ending of slavery, ending of segregation, ending of Jim Crow laws, the people fighting on behalf of Black Americans were the Republican Party. It was the Democrat Party fought to keep slavery in place, fought against giving constitutional recognition of the right to vote to Black Americans. The Democrat Party is the KKK. The Democrat Party were the ones pushing the Jim Crow laws. The Democrat Party were not the people behind the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act. It's the Republicans that did all of that. So getting around to where we are today, you have the radical leftists trying to push for reparations, trying to say that our government should set in place a program, a system, where you're going to be able to get reparations if you can show you're a descendant of slaves. And I'm telling you, friends, and they do this in part, they do this because they claim the validity of it by pointing to the American economic system and how, the differences in home ownership rates and income levels and all sorts of measures that the left says, you see where we are in this country, and all of this, differences in home ownership between Black Americans and white Americans, and income levels, and all the different criteria you can measure, all of that the left uses to say, and therefore, all of this, all the difference we see, clearly is a result of slavery, or the remnants of slavery, or the remnants of our system where we had, in our country, we had segregation. All of that is still flowing down today. So they're pushing for reparations. And I want to then, before I get to currently who's pushing for reparations on the Democrat side, I want to mention again the New York Times 1619 Project. The New York Times, after they figured out that they could not, despite their endless editorial cheerleading for trying to drive Trump out of office, endless editorial cheerleading for trying to convince America that Trump was guilty of Trump-Russia collusion, which did not happen. And after years and millions of dollars, the American people finally were told by Mueller, hey, actually, there is absolutely no evidence of any kind of Trump-Russia collusion. And in fact, if anyone's colluding with the Russians, it would be the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, the DNC. That's who is colluding. So you have the New York Times angry they couldn't sell the lie of the Trump-Russia collusion. Then they couldn't sell the lie of the impeachment effort over the Ukraine. We'll get to the Ukraine story in another segment here. Couldn't sell that. So you have the New York Times editorial people to say, oh, we have an idea now. Here's how we can keep America divided. Here's how we can drive out Trump. We can come up with a project called the 1619 Project. The entire purpose of the project is to throw out the ideas of 1776, throw out the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, and instead say that America needs to stop thinking about 1776 as the founding of America. Instead, we're going to have Americans try to turn their attention to the year 1619, and that being the founding of America, because that is the first recorded year they can determine that slaves were brought to America from Africa. It is an intentional effort, an intentional effort by the New York Times to uproot from the American people their belief in the goodness of their country, of the rightness of the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, the rightness of the ideas of the founding of our country, and instead direct their attention to the evil of slavery. Be clear, of course slavery was evil. Of course it was evil. And America, ourselves, through our own internal civil war with tremendous casualties, fixed the problem through the Civil War, ended slavery. But the 1619 Project by the New York Times is not simply to provide Americans with a fuller understanding of the times and dates of the slave trade. Everyone understands the slave trade happened. Everyone understands it's evil. Everyone understands slavery is an evil thing. But the New York Times is deliberately trying to contort Americans' love of the ideas of 1776, their focus on the ideas of 1776, and turn us back to summarize, the idea that America is simply rooted in slavery, founded in slavery, and this is the message you see in Black Lives Matter and Antifa throughout our country, that America as founded was racist, the founding ideas of America are racist, that capitalism, freedom, free markets are inherently racist systems. This is an effort on the New York Times part to continue and perpetuate this distrust in the ideas of America and love and embrace of the ideas of the radical left. And back to Obama for a moment. I wanted to say, Obama, in addition to what he did in not speaking up about the truth about Trayvon Martin and the truth about Michael Brown, was not willing to be forthcoming. He thought, in the 8 years he sat there in Washington, he thought he was actually putting in place many pieces moving toward the fundamental transformation of America. So he's slotting people into offices throughout the federal government, most importantly, the FBI, the State Department, the Department of Justice, the NSA, people inside high-level agencies who were sympathetic to and in line with his radical leftist Marxist agenda for America. President Obama filled the ranks as far as he could while he was there with people who would perpetuate his mission. He thought Hillary Clinton would win, everyone thought she'd win, and she could continue this radical leftist destruction of America. President Trump's victory constituted for the Obama team, the radical leftists in this country, a massive blow because he's not playing their game. He's not on their team. It's not just that he happens to have an R by his name. It's because he believes in the founding ideas of America. This is why Trump's victory drove the left insane. And it's also why the New York Times spent so much time and continues to spend so much time to vilify President Trump. Couldn't get him on the Russia-Trump hoax, couldn't get him on the impeachment, got around, now they're on the 1619 Project, trying to again replace the glorious founding ideas of America and our love for them and our reverence for them and our commitment to perpetuate them, and instead try to replace that natural love for those good ideas with a hatred of America, which they're trying to breed by perpetuating and teaching the 1619 Project. Then they ventured in, they've had a series of essays in the last few weeks, New York Times. One more recent thing was their big effort on the reparations issue. You have Democrats running on reparations, trying to talk about reparations. I actually lost track if I sent Matt the Wonderful. Did I send you a little clip of Biden, which was about his answer in the reparations? Yes, okay, reparations question. So I gotta tell you, Biden was asked the question when he participated in the primaries at all about reparations. I'll get to him in a second, but the New York Times devoted a massive column, entire Sunday review, talking about their economic manifesto to lay out the radical left-wing vision for redesigning American economy. And this is allegedly in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. But what they're actually talking about is they want to have the Federal Reserve target black employment. That's all the Federal Reserve should care about, black employment. Forget the rest of it. They also want to have banks. This is the New York Times. Banks must apologize for their culpability for and complicity in structural racism, another term they threw out. They never have to define it. They never have to point fingers and say, this is what I mean. It's a fancy sounding term they can use along with, structural racism, all the other terms they use, because it makes people feel like, well, there must be something to that, because they keep flinging out these big words. And the idea of it was, they must commit to, so they're saying they want the banks to apologize for their culpability, their complicity in structural racism. So the 4 steps they are suggesting banks have to do: cancel consumer debt for black customers. Cancel consumer debt for black customers. Eliminate banking fees for black customers. Provide interest-free mortgages to black homebuyers. Provide interest-free loans to black-owned businesses. If you are just going to say we're going to go back to the era of having, separate drinking fountains was wrong because it was racist, but these people are saying, oh no, if it's racist in favor of the group that we think should be favored, it's really okay. So this is the New York Times, number 1, agitating the American people, putting out, I can't even spend time reading all the things they're suggesting, but their goal and their mission is to destroy the idea of America, and America is simply being led along, having their thought prepared for this agitation. In America, you had the academics, again, to close out this segment, you had the academics in this country pushing Marxism, socialism, communism in academia. You can hardly find an America-loving, free market-loving person in the major universities and departments of economics and government. You can hardly find them. Or in history, it's radical leftists fill those ranks so kids leave college thinking that way. And then you have the cultural, all of the efforts that the Communist Party made to have the cultural pieces of our country, the fabric of our country, filled with communist leftist ideas. And you have President Obama weaving racial dissension and discussion and division, refusing to be honest about the progress made in America. I'm not saying America is perfect. There's always been racism, and it's a horrible evil. It's racism is evil no matter who's embracing it, whether it is white people, black people, brown people. Racism is evil. No one's saying it doesn't exist. But what President Obama had the opportunity to do was to set the facts straight on 2 major incidents in our country. He did not do it. He spent much of his presidency, other examples too, stirring racial division, suspicion, and hatred. So then you have New York Times participating in this, also stirring up the 1619 Project. Forget about the founding ideas of America, all the great things that Abraham Lincoln was trying to talk about in Lincoln-Douglas debates. Now we're going to focus on America's evil. This is fomenting and bringing about the destruction of America, a very, very, very dangerous and horrible time in America. So that's what we're really watching in this country. If you want to understand, if you want to look at the incidents that happen in this country and the way they're reported, recognize as you read stories, especially in places like New York Times, Washington Post, recognize the mission of the left is forever and always to divide America. It is never to unite America around those ideas, which, as we talked about in the first segment, Abraham Lincoln was pointing out. The ideas of all men created equal meant everybody. Rights to us from God meant for everybody. And the ideas that we are all the descendants of those ideas. That is our American identity. The left working so hard to divide America, and frankly in these days, very sadly, it seems as though it's working in some segments of America. To stand up for America is not to take a side on black versus white or any race or ethnicity. It's the ideas of America that we stand with, always working to make a better union, a more perfect union, or the ideas of the left, which is the ending, the destruction of America.